Before we jump into the discussion, I'd like to quickly introduce the speakers. Thank you so much. We'll start with you. Luigi Di Corato, you can come on stage. Luigi is an art history graduate and holds a master's degree in business from the MIP Politecnico di Milano. He's worked in the management of major cultural projects, international organizations, and directed public and private collaborations in the areas of arts. He's also a long-term lecturer on cultural management and was the chairman of the strategic committee of the International Associations of Museums in Paris up until 2018. Since 2018, he came back to Lugano as the Director of Cultural Affairs in the city of Lugano and is also a board member of LAC, the Lugano Center for Arts and Culture. So welcome and thank you for flying all the way up here.
Thank you. Quite boring person, but let's see what happens.
Definitely not. We heard her name already during your introduction, Dr. Krina Patel. Welcome. Dr. Krina Patel is an artist and interdisciplinary researcher working at the intersection of cognition, creativity, and inclusion. Krina's current work is in better understanding the science of joy in community, which builds on her doctoral research from Harvard. And Krina bridges theory and practice really in her current role as the first director of the Community Joy at East Boston Social Center. I look forward to talk more about joy tonight.
Thank you. It's so nice when people say nice things about you.
Last but not least, I'd like to welcome to stage Professor Vish. Professor Vish is the Likum Key Professor of Health Communication in the Department of Social and Behavioral Science at the Harvard Chan School of Public Health, as well as the McGraw-Patterson Center for Population Science at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. He's also the director of the Likum Schön Center for Happiness and Health, or Health and Happiness. And he's been a faculty member of many centers concerning health and communication, and he has published a vast body of research, papers, books, book chapters, to just name a few in the areas of communication inequalities, in health disparities, knowledge translation, public health communication campaigns, as well as public health preparedness. And we look forward to hear a little bit more about that. So we are here tonight to talk about the question or the topic, arts as medicine, where do we go from here? To really answer this question on where to go next, I think it's important to look at where are we today. So Vish, if you don't mind maybe doing a quick introduction to the audience who are maybe not familiar with the impacts of arts on health. What is the relationship and why are we talking about this today? Why is it significant?
Sure. Thank you. So first, let me thank Silvia and Swissnex and East Boston Community Partners, my friends here, and Luigi, and equally important, my team member, Lara Marciano, who is here for organizing this event. I don't know what the heck I'm doing, or what do I know, so, but I have friends in high places, so I ended up here. So seriously, so why are we discussing this? I think, there are a couple of reasons. So one, this body of work on arts in medicine and more broadly health, I would prefer the term health and well-being, which is much broader, has been going on for a while, I think, so the number of experiments and trials have been taking place. But COVID has brought it home to us. I think in some ways, the isolation that was forced upon us, both psychologically and physically, has led to very unhealthy outcomes, particularly around mental health. That has received a lot of attention, but also in physical health. In fact, I don't separate these things. I take the classic World Health Organization definition of health is not an absence of disease, but a complete state of well-being, physical, psychological, and social. So if you take that definition, I think COVID has highlighted the challenges we are facing. I think that's one of the reasons we are talking about it. Second, I think there is a recognition that social isolation has been increasing. It's an irony in some ways, but increasingly data are coming out globally because of aging population and a variety of social environmental conditions. Social isolation has increased, and that is impacting people in a variety of ways, and we can talk about that, right? And third, this is even more of an irony. In the age of social media, when we are getting increasingly connected to each other in some ways, social media have also reportedly have contributed to that sense of isolation. Though, as I will say later, that evidence is also mixed. So these are some of the reasons why we are beginning to pay more attention, because we feel that arts, depending upon how you define it, and we can come to that, there are virtually anywhere between 3,000 to several thousand studies of some kind which show that arts, engaging in arts and consumption of arts, whether it is more active or passive or consuming of arts, has an impact on a variety of health outcomes. So that's, and people have recognized that, and increasingly we feel that it's a way to bring everyone together, and so that's one of the reasons why we are talking about it. I can go into the specifics of it, but I would leave that for the conversation later.
You brought up a lot of evidence. I would love to go into a bit more of that. So what are actually the effects? What do we see? And you also brought up health and happiness and joy. And maybe, Krina, you can tell us a little bit about what is joy, what is happiness, and what is health, and how are they connected?
I'm not sure. Do I need this? I guess I do, yeah. So thank you for asking about joy. So when Justin proposed that I join the community, East Boston Social Centers as the director of Community Joy, I was really alarmed because I thought I would have to, wear one of those clown outfits, come jumping down the pavement, always saying, joy. And it's not that at all, right? I mean, I always say joy is the art of composing a life, from my mentor, Mary Catherine Bateson, who's written about composing a life. And that, thanks to Justin and these Boston Social Centers, I got a whole year to do the review of literature in positive psychology, and mostly in positive psychology because that's where the studies on happiness are. And and people will say it's all semantics after all, happiness researchers will say that. But I'm trying to be bold and courageous and say, no, it is different. When we talk about joy, and specifically community joy, we are talking of a more sustained state of contentment and connection. The connection bit is important. And then, and this definition comes from one of the papers which has done a review. And also, the literature in joy is very thin. Most of the work is in theology and in literature. But in the positive psychology, the research on community joy, and I emphasize the community part because of the connections that are important. So we needed to define joy because Justin has this ambitious agenda of moving the needle. Every time he says moving the needle, I want to run for the hills, because moving the needle on an emotion of joy is a long-term. We need a long-term commitment. And every time we have a meeting, I say, are we committing to being in East Boston and we're doing this work for the long term? Because I don't think we'll see the results of joy in community-wide. We are a small community. We have 45,000 people in East Boston at this time. But to move the needle on that, on an emotion of joy, is going to be a decade-long work, I think. And it's structural and systemic and all of that. So the definition of joy is a sustained state of connection and contentment. That's the definition of joy. So that, and the Dalai Lama, His Holiness has talked about it, and Bishop Tutu has talked about how, despite challenges, you retain that kind of balanced state. And we needed the definition because we are ambitious, but we did get one win, and that is that we are doing a Boston citywide survey on community joy. And the survey is underway. We're going to get the results soon. I'm afraid of the results because there will be controversy about that as well, about sampling and, which neighborhood is better. And of course, all of that. But the arts, bringing the conversation back, I just wanted to lay the ground on what I mean by joy. The arts play an important role in this. As Justin mentioned, Dawn Panos, our active adults coordinator. I was there last week doing an activity with them where we talked about memories. Are my research, my subsequent to the doctoral work, where my work was in cognition and embodiment. I've been focusing a lot on memories and stories. And the activity we did last week was about what's your favorite flower? What's your, do we have a memory around flowers? And then the amount of stories that came out about this woman in Italy, and she remembered her childhood growing up in a small village and the jasmine flowers that grew there. And then we did a collage. And I was talking to one of the audience members just a few minutes ago about the kind of silence that happens when people are in that flow. Csikszentmihalyi has talked about the flow, and when the mind and body are connected and you are immersed in an activity, and the medical benefits of that, and how do you research that? How do you quantify that? That's the challenge, I think. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much. I want to get in a bit more into like a practical perspective that the audience also understands. Like, what are the initiatives and the measures that we currently have in place? And maybe we can start with you, Luigi. We have Lugano here. So what is the role? What initiatives do you have in place, and what are the effects of that you see?
It's quite hard to speak about the effects because we are in a starting point. We just start to develop this new project because the city started to think about culture in another way. So culture normally is to go to theater, to go to see a movie, for a concert, to see an exhibition. But we try to figure out that culture is also something that has a social impact. So for us, culture should be in the future. We started to do this, something that is related to quality of life, to something that can help us to grow up our community. So that's why we decided to open a bit the scheme, so to try to demonstrate that, for instance, culture could be a way to build a community that, in terms of health, and Lugano and Canton Ticino is one of now is the last study demonstrated that is the place in which the expectation of life is the highest in Europe. So it's 86.7 so it's quite a lot. So, but the idea is that consuming culture is a way to augment the expectation of life. So the idea was to start to explain to doctors, for example, that the consuming culture could be a good way to build an healthy community, and also a way to remove this from the community, also in a political perspective, the idea that is just entertainment. It's not easy at all, of course. We just spent like 260 million to build the new cultural center. It's quite a lot for a city of 67,000 people, on a canton of 350,000 people. So we are a really small community. So now I think we are definitely in the position to change the paradigm and to show that culture could be used in a better way. So with the IBSA Foundation, we tried to, the starting point was to build a simple website presenting the best practices on culture and health all over the world. After the publication of this super relevant research of World Health Organization in 2019 that shows the 20 years of results of the use of culture and arts in health. And this website now is in 4 languages. And it's quite strong because it was the first time ever in our community and in Switzerland probably that there is a place in which you can learn more about the discipline. That was the starting point. But the second step was to establish a course in the Faculty of Biomedical Science and Medicine in Lugano at the university for the young doctors, but now is open to students from communication of culture and health. Next academic year will be the 3rd year, and we started with the general course. The second was on music therapy, and next one will be on literature and health, for instance. So putting together doctors and of course artists, and to show them that they could use literature in this case to reduce the use of drugs as a painkillers. So it's really another way, and we are as we said yesterday to Professor Wish, we are just preparing the field. Starting to the idea that culture comes from colere, from the Latin colere, that means to cultivate. So we are trying to do something to transform our community probably in 20 years.
So you're cultivating. So maybe, so where is the biggest hope? Where do we think we're going to have the biggest impact? And also when we look at the studies, we talk both about the treatment, you say for pain, but also prevention. So where do we see the biggest impact that we can have?
But the prevention is really important, of course. But we are a really small community, so the idea is to help people in one of the most scary field, that is the mental disease. After the pandemic, also we have a lot of problems in this. Young adults are the less consumers of culture. To help them to understand that arts more than culture could be important for them to develop their skills, and to reduce, of course, disease and problems that came from depression, that came from of course, from problems in relationship. Could be probably one of the first things that we would like to change. And Laura Marciano, that she's here with us, she's working a lot with the effect on digital on the young adults. And I think this connection between digital culture and disease could be a good field to develop.
Vish, maybe I'd like to ask you, so art is a very subjective field, right? It's difficult to grasp. What does it mean? Is it art? Is it not art? It's quite easy. I have a headache, I take ibuprofen. Problem solved, right? But what needs to change in order for arts to have this kind of effect? Not the headache, but how do we integrate it in a way that people think of this as part of a prevention and a potential treatment? What needs to change?
So I think one way to think about it is like a spectrum from ill-being to well-being, right? So there's fairly good evidence, for example, on the ill-being side, among children, engaging in programs that are arts-related, It could be very creative arts. In fact, even the simplest thing, like reading a book, starting reading books, right, which can be done, to participating in arts programs in schools, in the communities, can have an impact on their behaviors in terms of pro-social behavior and reducing antisocial behaviors, right? And paying attention to things, being less hyperactive, you know. So things like that, from both an ill-being perspective to a well-being perspective, where they can engage in pro-social behaviors, understanding empathy. You know, if I'm playing with a group of people in a group, it's also a question of cooperation. How do I learn cooperation, negotiation, navigation, right? These are not like boardrooms. You know, how do I do that, right? So certainly there are a varieties of ways of whatever the definition, and there are some limitations to the empirical scientific literature, but whatever the definition, engaging in those kinds of artistic programs leads to certain outcomes, both on the ill-being side as well as on the well-being side, through these mechanisms of cooperation, cohesion, and feeling a part of the community, etc. And not just in children, it has been shown to be the same effect on adults, including their physical health, you know, improving their physical health, not just in a clinical setting, so ibuprofen and headache, but actually a sense of belonging, you know, to a community. And that is very critical for social well-being, and loss of, or not feeling alienated. You know, you go and talk to people, they don't feel a part of the community. They don't feel they're a part of a society. And that can lead to a variety of unhealthy outcomes, including substance abuse, for example, right? And I think even in adults, this has an impact. And particularly among elderly, and the world is growing older, you know, despite what we hear, actually longevity is increasing. And we have fairly good evidence now that, again, it's not like a magic bullet, but sustained engagement in the community through artistic programs. Justin was mentioning, right, you know, even weaving certain things, you know, and that kind of a group activity allows them to feel that they belong. And that has, again, an impact on a variety of well-being outcomes, you know. So I think to respond, it's just not one definition of art, and that's one of the limitations. What does art mean? But understanding the mechanisms of activities and how those activities have an impact on well-being and ill-being is more critical, I think. So visiting a museum is one thing. Being a part of I'm just seeing out of the window, not that I'm not paying attention to any of you, but I am paying attention, but I'm seeing a group of people exercising there and doing their gymnastics, actually, you know. So it's you know, being out there, being a part of the group, right? Now I've distracted everybody, right? You know, so they all want to go out and say, right? But on a day like this, right, being a part of that communal activity, and that's why I think I'm always hesitant to talk about only happiness as an individual thing. Actually, it's a more communal, right? It's more group level sense of purpose. I think, and that's where I think we can make a huge difference. And I'm happy to talk later about how to do that through policies and practices.
That would have been my follow-up, but I also want to give you the chance to respond.
Yes, also because you have two kind of experience, different experiences. One is consuming art, so going to a museum to see an exhibition. The other one is to do something with art, and sometimes I think it's correct to speak about applied art. So in this we speak a lot of applied music, applied visual art. So you have to take the technique of art and using for other purposes. So it's quite strong to say, but sometimes it's not something that you can do with an artist, but you can do it with someone that use technique from the art, every kind of art, but to a special purpose. So if you have an headache every day or 3 times a week, probably it's not bad to go to a concert hall for a couple of nights. many countries, there is also this possibility. This is the culture under prescription. So you go to the doctor. The doctor instead go to give you the ibuprofen, give you two consults for a week. And in Finland, for example, they do a lot of things. In Great Britain, they're doing this. So it's a way to take you from your bubble and to put you in something else that sometimes is bigger, because it's not just a concert, but it's to be part of a community of people that loves music, and then and they go together in a concert hall, and they live together emotions.
Yeah, you know, it makes me wonder. I'm just wondering. I've been reading the work. I've been looking at the affective sciences, the field of affective sciences, and looking at the work of Lisa Feldman Barrett over in Northeastern, who's talking about the body budget. And like, you know, when you're angry, you drink a glass of water, and it might help because it's the mind and body are connected, and so you'll physically start feeling better. And I thought, yeah, whatever. But then it did work for me. The other day I was really annoyed, and I had a glass of water, and I was like, I'm feeling better. Also after eating, you know the nice meal you have and that little buzz you get. So I'm just thinking that maybe even an art activity, like we have a person in our program, Amato, who just wants to sit on the other side and doesn't want to join us. Just is laughing about Amato because he just brings a smile to people's face. He's curmudgeonly. He comes by himself and sits by himself, and he always calls himself the only gent in the program. But you know, he participated in this activity last week, and it was almost like he has Parkinson's, so he couldn't, cut very well. But he felt kind of, I feel, and again, this is hard to articulate, but it felt that he was feeling happier after that activity. And so I'm thinking of the body budget and the art, like maybe an art activity, have an ibuprofen. How about and journaling has there's a lot of evidence about journaling. So write a small paragraph, or sit with a glass of water and go sit under the shade of a tree on a warm day, or look at the sky, or something like that. And it sounds a little artsy, but hey, the times are really bad right now, right? Mental health crisis and all of that, and of course pull out all the stops, and artists also. So I'm more than happy to join, but I think there is a promise there, and for research, also to do research in that area and give people the data that they need.
So, and you brought it up, kind of how to do it. So I want to follow up on this kind of how do we do it, right? There is a lot of evidence. You say some is maybe conflicting, or it's maybe not that clear, but there is evidence that it has a positive impact on well-being and health in general. But how do we make this this topic, more public? How can we talk about it? What are the hurdles, and who needs to get involved so that everyone has access to this?
Yeah, I just want to quickly say that when I just remembered during the pandemic, when they were giving out kits in East Boston, the ICA reached out to me and said if I could make an art activity that would go with the food kit. So they did. We had a memory mobile, or we made mobile, the hanging thingies, and it went as part of the kit to the East. So in museums, and right now ICA has an exhibit at the Watershed where the same memory mobile activity is also being made. And I was there for the opening, and there were adults and children, all of them making that. So I think that if more, and I despite City of Boston and all the criticisms, the city is very supportive, at least, and has helped a lot. So the government, the cultural institutions, and the medical establishment also coming together and working together and giving. And there is this false dichotomy between art and science, and which produces these hierarchies that science is more important than the arts. That didn't, as far as I know from the Greek, Galen also talked about the arts and science as being together, being an integrated thing. So I think my biggest call would be to demolish these false dichotomies and hierarchies and work in an integrated way.
One project that we are experimenting at the LAC is Dance for Parkinson. Many people with Parkinson has problem in walking, but they can dance. is a super interesting technique that can help them to move in the space, but in a different way. So using the other techniques to do it. So I think, of course, evidence-based is an obsession for all of us because we need numbers. But sometimes you can have two different approach. One that is more scientific, and the other that there's a social impact without hard data. So the mixture between the two, of course, is not easy. But for us that we are policymakers, so we work on the field on cultural policies, probably we need the two.
So let me maybe state this very categorically, because this has come up a couple of times. Arts versus science, or that's hard evidence, numbers versus not. Let me just say this, right? We have evidence-based practice, right? None of us want to go to a doctor who is not credentialed, right? I mean, I don't know how many of us want to undergo surgery if that person is not qualified, right? So there is evidence-based practice. It's absolutely critical. But a very well-known public health scientist talked about practice-based evidence, right? Where you actually, take it from the field. And so what's happening, right? This is where we give credit to people. People know, you don't need a PhD to live your life, right? So, and the practice-based evidence is also very critical. So I just wanted to address that issue head on. And particularly for a subject like this, I think that kind of a reciprocity between evidence-based practice and practice-based evidence is very critical. That's why I'm so excited to share the panel with my colleagues from Lugano, one of my most favorite cities, and of course East Boston, which is fast becoming a favorite, if you let me, So, so that's one issue. So the question is, who should do it, right? That's the question. So it's not just, and this is where I always focus on the communal side. Because you can say, well, be happy, do something so that take a walk or count to 10, do some meditation, do some yoga. I'm not against any of those things. Those are wonderful. It's very good advice. It's even sound advice. But my program, for the last 20 years, we have been focusing on our lab as shift the burden away from the individual into the group. Right, into the community. And that's why it's so exciting for the cities to say, we will play the role and the most individual of the emotion called joy or happiness or well-being, right? And so this is where I think policymakers can do a lot. It's interesting to know that you spent more than $200 million on a, so I want to talk about that at some point with you. But policymakers have made decisions, right? This has happened in Hong Kong, where they built huge cultural centers. But community-based organizations can play an equally important role, and I can give you stories, right? Where they take the responsibility and not just focus on physical health, right? Promoting exercise, physical activity, or controlling blood pressure and promoting screening, but also on the more social well-being side. And community-based organizations, so I, just to illustrate, if you, there was a time when I was in Hong Kong, I got up, I was flying all night after a 14-hour, 15-hour flight. I got up in the morning, said, I haven't slept. If I go to the room, I will sleep. That's what will happen. I had meetings. So I went out for a run. One of the most interesting sights was this. There were this 20 or 30 women, maybe in their 70s, 80s, 90s, I don't know the age. They were all doing, these exercises in the park, right? And the point is that the park was built and they made space for them to engage in that exercise, right? So to me, the owner's responsibility burden can be shifted from that individual to the policymakers or to community-based organizations and faith-based organizations, which are also critical. So.
You raised an interesting point about saying this space was built, right? Someone promoted this and built this. So I want to talk about access. We're very lucky here in Boston, lucky in Lugano to have these centers, but this is a greater problem. The World Health Organization shows that people living in post-conflict regions, refugees, people who are affected by war, they over-proportionally struggle with mental illnesses. So how can we reach these people? How can we make sure that everyone has access, not the lucky people living in East Boston or Lugano? It's not an easy answer, I know.
Right. So let me, so you want to address it? I don't know. As soon as an equity issue come up, so, somehow the mic is passed on to me. But this is of personal interest to me, right? And I have spent my career examining this issue, right? So everything we know on population health, we know that there are extreme disparities in who enjoys better health compared to who doesn't enjoy better health, right? I mean, that literature, it's called the social determinants of health. I don't like the term, that's social drivers of inequalities, actually, which is the term I prefer. It's very clear. If you're poor, if you are from neighborhoods that are materially deprived, right? Or if you have other challenges in life, unemployment, all these things, poverty, all these things, impact health. And art is a great example of that, right? The question of who has access to art. So the literature is very, very clear on this. Who goes to museums? Who goes to libraries, right? Just think about it, right? In fact, where are the libraries located? Which neighborhoods? Where are the museums located, right? What are the public transit access issues, right? So it's very clear, however, and which schools have programs and teachers and counselors who can spend time on arts, right? So all these things matter, and it's very clear that the evidence says that access to arts and the impact on health are differential across race, ethnicity, class, geography. Right? That's very clear. It's also clear that if you solve the problem of access, people from a lower socioeconomic position benefit much more than those from a higher socioeconomic position, I think. And this is why policy is important, right? Not the individual focus. Again, the policy is important. So equity becomes central to this issue. It's a bit more difficult to go after this, people like refugees, and especially in certain areas. It's, I can answer that, but the difficult part, I will leave it to my other colleagues.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to answering the question about refugees and places like that. I also want to, and I want to tie it in with what you said about art, the cultural expression, and the arts. And this is something that has come up among many scholars and artists. This idea of, especially when you're talking in a global context, because there are cultural expressions and cultural ways in place, like, in the folk culture and all of these. So it doesn't have to be, yes, I recognize all of that, and I agree with you about museums and libraries and all of that. But if we were to attend to the fact that there are ways of expression in place in different cultures, and it doesn't have to be in this classical sense or organized sense of going to museums and libraries. What are the dance practices in place? What are rituals in place? We used to always laugh in India. We used to have a holiday every day because there was some community that was celebrating something, and so there was a holiday, right? And so there are rituals in place, there are dances in place, there's music in place, and so when we are the refugee communities, and I know artist groups that are already working and doing a great job of working in these camps and communities, but to recognize that there are expressions in place, and to sort of focus on that as well. I think that's important, and of course it's important to have museums and libraries and access and all of that. And I'm glad that the institutions in Boston are making a real effort. Both the ICA and the two big ones, ICA and SMFA, are making a real effort to do that.
So we're almost coming to an end of this discussion. Before I open up the floor for questions, I still have one question that is unanswered, and it's behind me. Where do we go from here? So where do we want to be in 10 years, in 20 years? What is the hope? Where are we striving towards?
The hope is that the social impact of culture must be more radicated into the community. So the culture, I agree with Professor Wish, but there are a lot of experiments in France, for instance, moving cultural center into neighborhoods, and they are not always with good results. So sometimes the response is in the community. So the culture is a typical example of things that is top-down. Asking community to co-create culture is something that for us is really important because it's another way to give back the lead for deciding what culture is. Probably in 20 years, these practices must be much more effective than nowadays. But to do all this, you need a strategy. You need to share decision with communities. So my dream is to have a program in our museum that is not decided just by the curators and the director, but is also decided in a negotiation with the community to ask them what is affecting for them, if it's useful for them. The word useful sometimes is not so elegant, but I think we as a policymaker, we have to use it more. So it's useful for you, yes, not. Why not? Starting engaging a dialogue with the communities. Now we have the responsibility to use money from taxes. You have the responsibility to manage a public the public heritage. So we have to figure out that we are not doing this to develop our bibliography, but we are doing this for in the help of society.
So we are already on our way to joy. So 10 years from now, we have moved the needle in East Boston. But, as I said, I think the hope is that we'll have a more integrated approach to all of this, not the dichotomy between art and science, but together what we can do. And lastly, definitely the centering of marginalized cultures, bringing more and co-creating in the community. And that's my hope. And I think we'll get there. I really think that we are on an upward trajectory, and we are looking forward and upward and onward.
I think in our earlier conversation when we were in the huddle earlier, as I said, to me, equity is the center of all this, right? I think who benefits? Everything we do, I ask the question, who benefits at the end of the day? And the premise is that the benefits are differential, and we have to address that, right? So that there are no inequalities or disparities. That's where we want to go. Number one. Number two, I think we have to highlight, it's just not the dichotomy, I think Karina said it very well, between art and science. It's a dichotomy between, or a lack of understanding of the definition of what health means, as I keep saying, right? It's not just physical health. I think, we have doctors, or mental health, or, the social health is also equally critical. And how do we want to address it? I think globally what you're saying is, are we going to put enough emphasis in building institutions? When I say building institutions, it's wonderful that Luigi's city has built a very expensive institution, and I'm not going after you. I love it. I love the fact that you're doing it, But what I'm even in our schools, for example, right? In investing in it, what we are seeing increasingly are budget cuts, for example, right? When you cut a budget in a school, it's not about eliminating 3 teachers or 4 teachers. You're forcing schools to make choices, right? What will be taught? And we always say, oh, you should teach math and science. There are arts in it, right? If you value that. I think to me, it's centering equity, at drawing the attention of policymakers, making space in the community, strengthening colleagues like this, their work in the community is absolutely fundamental, I think. And the last thing I want is I am dedicating our center, to translate that evidence base. I don't want it to sit in the journals, and as I said, there are 3,000 or 5,000 studies out there. That's useless to me. I mean, not useless, it's my career after all. But the point is, I think we really want to get that evidence out, and we will create a hub or a platform along with others to exactly do that. But also bring that practices, best practices, promising practices. I don't like best practice. Promising practices, into the research setting to evaluate and feed those data back to the communities. I think that's where we want to go.
Thank you so much. I would like to open up the floor. I think we're a bit short on time, but I think we have time for one question. So if someone is the brave person, or a couple, okay. There's also the opportunity afterwards to network, and hopefully our panelists are able to stay a little bit. So if you have a question.
Well, you mentioned the measurement. You'd mentioned the measurement issue. There's some work by Paul Ekman with micro expressions, and they don't necessarily correlate straightforwardly with how people feel, but it is data. And there's a lot of development of this kind of automatic recognition of micro expressions for the purposes of advertising. Understand some stores have little cameras, and they look at the expressions on people's faces when they look at the products. And maybe that kind of technology could be leveraged in what you're doing with Joy,
Thank you. Yeah, we would be great. It would be great. I mean, if that would be, the goal is to move the needle on joy, and the goal is always the people. But if we can get some, like even the survey that we just are doing, if we can contribute to the literature on joy, that would be awesome. That would be something, a bonus.
Right. Just to say, as scientists, we are obsessed with measurement, right? So, and that's okay. I mean, but who cares? My career is not that important. But it can be done. You're absolutely correct. In fact, my colleague, Dr. Osgood, is here, who actually has developed a computer program to do these kinds of micro-measurement, ecological momentary assessment, and Laura has been using it in Lugano. So absolutely, I think the commercial sector is much more agile in doing these things. There is a lot of psychophysiology, physiological experiments that can be done. And of course, at the community level, I think the measures are there. It's not that they're perfect, but they are there. It's a question of, I think, using them appropriately. But to me, it's interpretation, not be overly fetishistic, about these measures as much as interpreting it to really develop the practices.
We do one more. You ask for one more question, so we're going to have one more question, and then we close it.
Thank you. I'm an art therapist, and my specialization is in creative aging, and I wrote a book about a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, and so I know very intimately the mechanisms of how arts engagement and the arts therapies really help a person to make these changes, to experience joy, and joy is really at the center of the work that I've been researching and doing. So when I think about the research, it's really challenging because how do you identify what are you talking about? Arts engagement? Are you talking about arts appreciation? Are you talking about arts therapies? And then what are the mechanisms you're looking at? And it seems to me, and I've been on part of this research team, the follow-up to this 2019 Daisy Van Court thing, and it's so many discussions of like, well, what are we measuring and what are we leaving out? That seems to me that this research slows things down. But if someone were to come to one of my groups, for example, and walk by and see their loved one who had been just like kind of almost like what you were talking about with the person who's non-participating, and they all of a sudden are like up in their chair, they're participating, there's joy, their family member sees it. It's like, if that video or that message can go directly to policymakers and the funding can just go right to programs, can just go right into the communities to create these things. And yes, the research should come, but it seems to me that the research right now, because of the complications of how do you measure the arts and how do you measure arts engagement, it's just complicating things. So that would be my hope.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's difficult to respond, but in our experience, we are trying to do both. So now we keeping the fingers crossed. Probably we will start a project with Silvia to reduce pain in people treated for cancer using music. The particular type of music is algorithm music. So because with this kind of music, you are not is applied music. It's not so important that the creation is art, but it's important to produce endorphins with frequencies of this algorithm that can produce music, sort of music. So in this case, it's really important to measure. It's really, really important. So do it with doctors together, and of course with music therapists together is so important, because probably if the research has good results, we can use it in a big scale. But but we are speaking about individuals. And sometimes the problem is dealing with doctors that you are not an individual, but you are a disease. So our project, the Cultura project, I think as one of the desires that we have in our heart is to teach doctors that we are person with the potential. we are more than a disease, so the approach could be different, and arts and culture could help in this.
All right, this is the hardest part, to close the discussion, but I hope we can continue it actually in the networking. I would like to thank our three speakers. Thank you so much, Luigi, Krina, Vish, for being here. Big round of applause.